Hey folks, Malforian here, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be covering Dev Diary 2 World and Map for Millennia, which is Paradox Interactive's latest announced grand strategy game that they are publishing. If you weren't here for the first Dev Diary, I will leave a link to that in the description down below. That covered the main pillars of what they're wanting to do with the game, how they're going to make it set apart from other 4X games. And today's Dev Diary is obviously going to go over the World and Map. Not maybe how you thought it might. It is actually a little bit different to what I thought from the title itself. And I have gone through this a couple of times. There's a lot of information in here. I'm not going to say it's confusing, but there's a lot of things to pick up that are different from other 4X games. And I'm going to do my best to explain them to you. But as always, leave a comment down below if there's anything you've got any questions on. If there's anything I've got blatantly wrong, also do let me know. Hit that like button if you enjoy it. But we're just going to get straight into it. And the first thing they're going to cover is regions. Now, if you want to think about regions, this is basically like your zone of influence that you have in Civilization, you know, where you have the colored map border. That is the land that you own directly. And that is what regions are, from the best I can tell from how this is written. We will get into it a little bit, but that is basically what I've gathered what regions are. There was a little bit of confusion in here, but there are some dev responses we will get to later on. But anyway, if you want to think about it as regions are basically your zone of influence on a map. So at the start of the game, you control a single region. Regions are the most vital element of the game economy. They define your borders, allow you to put your people to work, and let you build units and buildings. So very much like any 4X game you've played that's like this, you know, Civilization, Old World, Humankind. They've all got this kind of basic building blocks of how a 4X works, because that is basically what a 4X means. The capital at the heart of a region will feel pretty familiar to players comfortable with other 4X games, particularly at the start. Grow your population, work tiles, collect more resources, become an industrial powerhouse. And there's already a hint here of how this is going to work differently to most 4X games you've probably played. And it definitely was something that kind of caught me off guard when I first read through this. So at a high level, the region's population determines how many workers you can assign, while territory controlled by a region determines what these workers can do. Early on, many of your workers will be foraging, gathering from the land directly. This type of gathering is 1-to-1, so if you have 3 forests, you can have 3 workers. Now this obviously makes sense. The beginning of the game is set, not like prehistoric, but like the first startings of civilization in the world. This is fine to get started, but to really get your economy rolling, you need to build improvements such as farms and hunting camps, or oil wells and computer factories in the later ages. Improvements dramatically boost the value of workers in a region, providing goods that are worth significantly more than foraging alone can generate. Of course, if you have the right national spirit, perhaps there are some alternate strategies you can find. So we're going to go on a little bit of a tangent here. It did come up in the comments in the last Dev Diary, and I have seen some kind of confirmation elsewhere about how this is going to work. So we did wonder, do you play as, say, Sweden? There is a screenshot here, so we'll go with Sweden. Are all the bonuses based around your nation? And that isn't how it's going to work. It's kind of like how Humankind works, from what I've been able to find out. So you do pick a nation, so you do play Sweden, Turkey, I think we've seen, France we've seen, and you do get some slight bonuses depending on who you start as. But the majority of your bonuses and how your civilization is themed comes from these national spirits. Now, they were covered in the last Dev Diary. I think there was Spartan tactics were shown, and we did wonder, oh, does that mean Sparta's in the game? And they might be in the game as a nation, but it isn't actually tied to them. You actually pick these national spirits based on how you want to specialize your campaign. So very much like how it works in Humankind, where you can pick different kind of themes for your civilization to work through. And that sounds like how it's going to work in this as well. You have your base nation, and then you build it using these national spirits that you can pick and choose from, depending, I guess, on technologies and things like that. I'm sure they're going to go into way more detail in these in a future Dev Diary, but I wanted to mention that here because it is kind of alluded to slightly. Regions can also be strengthened by constructing capital buildings. These are permanent upgrades to the region. These represent infrastructure, monuments, and other ways to improve your region as a whole. Like improvements, there are a huge range of these, providing additional resource income, army enhancements, and other bonuses. So if you want to think about this as basically, well, improvements are, as it says, improvements. These are very much like if you play Civilization, you know, you build a mine on an ore deposit, you put a farm in some wheat or something, maybe you have fisheries on the coast or something. And then these capital buildings, as you can see in this screenshot below, these are basically buildings you build in your capital. Now, this gets a little bit confusing later on in the Dev Diary, but I'm going to try and keep it simple for the time being. So in your capital, you can build these and then they give you bonuses, I think, to your entire region, basically. They give, food stockpiles. You can have palisades, which make it better defended. A council, maybe that gives you like tech points and things like that. And, little things specific to a capital itself. And then what they're going to get onto a little bit down here is towns. But before we get there, they are going to talk about vassals and growing your nation. Now, this is where it gets a little bit confusing. I almost think this growing your nation should be later on. I think they should have covered regions, towns, which we will get to, and then outposts, and then talked about growing your nation. But we are going to cover it now because it is in this section of the dev diary, and I don't want to forget about it or skip it or something. Hopefully this makes sense as we go through it. Growing your nation by gaining more nations involves vassals, which immediately is very confusing as a sentence. Now, basically what it's talking about, and there is a dev response later, which we will talk about, is instead of, as I mentioned earlier, where like in Civilization, you can have your city and then you just build another city somewhere else, grab some land, have a border, they kind of merge together, and that's how you expand. You can build towns within that, which is kind of like building a city in Civ, but a little bit different, and they are going to get into that in a second. But to actually expand your nation like across the map, you basically need to interact with these vassals, and then you can integrate them into your realm, and then they basically become like co-capitals or additional capitals in your realm, and that's how you claim these other regions. Anyway, I'm going to read through the rest of this, but I kind of wanted to try explain it there. I probably didn't do the best, but hopefully it helps you out a little bit. So these are similar to regions, but they operate mostly on their own. They will grow over time and claim parts of the map, and they contribute some of their income to you each turn as a tribute. Now, again, it misses off here. I think this means if you make them your tribute, they don't obviously start as a tribute to you, I would imagine. It would be pretty weird if they did. Now, I can only imagine they don't start as tributes, and you have to, diplomatically make them a tribute, or maybe you can conquer them and they become a tribute or something. I'm not too sure. It is kind of weirdly worded. You don't have to manage their needs or worker assignments of this region, and they also don't incur any of the costs associated with your region, so they can be very useful in painting the map without slowing down your economy. When the time is right, you can convert a vassal into a region to utilize its potential more fully, which I think basically does confirm what I was talking about earlier. You basically buddy up or conquer, by the sounds of it, these vassals. Now, I'm thinking of vassals, basically, again, if you've played Civilization, the city-states that are in Civ 6, it sounds like they work like those. They're just individual cities that kind of expand on the map. I guess they have military units. They do improvements and things, but they're not like full civilizations in the game. And then you can basically make them a tribute of yours. Again, kind of like how it works in Civ. And then ultimately, depending on how you play your civilization yourself, how many times am I going to say civilization in a game that isn't called Civilization? Let's find out in this video. Anyway, yeah, and then you can basically integrate them into your realm. And then that is how you kind of expand out on the map in a big way. You can actually expand your initial zone, and they're going to cover that in a second. We will talk a lot more about how vassals, needs, improvements, and goods work in a future dev diary, as there are lots of interesting gameplay details to cover there. Yes, there is. Yes, there is. It's kind of weird how they just threw this in as a paragraph, like right at the beginning of this dev diary, and then they just don't talk about it again, really. That's a little introduction into it, and from what I've seen elsewhere and some little previews and things, it does sound like that's how it works. But before we just go around in circles, let's go on to the next section, which is towns. In addition to settling new regions, you can also settle new towns. Towns are a part of a region, smaller population centers that boost the central capital. Each town also influences the expansion of the region's borders, so they present a lot of choices for defining the shape of your region. Do you want to steer your region towards some vital resources, or claim disputed territory from another nation? Do you try to maximize the total area your region can control, or focus it more compact, easily defensible setup? Each game will require you to adapt your strategic positioning differently. So again, this is how it works, like expanding your borders. You can build these towns. As you can see in this screenshot, you have Stockholm, and then you have Sigtuna, which is a town. And it kind of works like Civ, as I said earlier, but it also doesn't work like that. It sounds like you can only build these within your regions. You can't build towns outside of your regions to claim a big chunk of land. They are going to go into it in a second, but you can basically build them close to your capital, as they've done here, just to kind of expand it a little bit, or you can build it at the edge of your region to kind of push it out a little bit more, but then obviously it's a little bit harder to defend versus it being close to your capital. So yeah, that's how to think about it. Again, it's kind of getting your head around regions, capitals, towns. But if you think about it, as I said before, regions are just your land that you own, like this. Capital is obviously just your capital city. And then towns are basically like minor settlements that you build that kind of expand your realm. But Stockholm in this example is your only like city that you ever build, unless you incorporate one of these vassals. And then I think you get another one. I don't think that vassal converts into a town, but again, that'll be covered later on. But anyway, on to the next section. Enemies may try raid your towns. If a town falls, your region can lose territory that was controlled by that town. So in this example here, I guess they would lose this bit of extra land that's kind of like bulged out from Stockholm due to them building it. Towns can also contribute militia units to the capital, bolstering defenses when they are attacked, which creates some interesting tactical choices when assaulting an enemy region. When planning your offense, do you chip away at their towns to weaken them, or do you bypass the towns and go straight for their capital? So it is interesting how this kind of like different way of having your civilization built is actually going to lead to different kind of gameplay that you don't see in other 4X games, or not ones that I've played. Do leave a comment down below if this plays like something else that you've played. But yeah, you can kind of go straight for their capital, and then I guess you just conquer their entire realm. Or you can kind of chip away at them, as they say, at these towns and kind of weaken them, basically. Because I don't think you can capture these towns. I think you basically just kind of delete their land, basically, by doing it, which is kind of weird, but yeah, I'm down for something a little bit different, so we'll see how it works out in a later dev diary. Initially, your towns will generate more wealth for the region based on how many improvements you have built nearby. As your nation's capabilities in civil engineering improve over time, you can expand the towns to a higher level, increasing their bonus. Towns can also specialize. They can become mining towns, farming towns, and such things. A town's specialization allows it to provide different resources and require different improvements. Cleverly using your towns to accomplish strategic and economic goals is very satisfying when you can jungle it all, when you can jungle all the competing interests correctly. So again, I like the sound of this. So I guess in this example, you could build it down here and have like a forestry town, making wood and making parchment, which they kind of covered in the last one, where you can convert wood into research by making books from it and using them that way. And then I guess you could like move one over here, and maybe if you have fisheries, you can have, you know, like a fishing town. It doesn't really go into exactly how it specializes. Does it specialize just from using that certain thing, or can you actually specialize it by changing how it's set up? Again, they'll probably cover that later on. Creating a new town can only be done by using culture power. So there's no like settlers in this game by the sounds of it. Big moments in the growth of your nation that happen periodically. While creating a town is only one of the possible uses for culture, knowing when and where to expand is an important skill to master in Millennia. So that's the main bit about how to expand your presence on the map. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. As I've said before, I've done my best to explain it. I know I've probably repeated myself a few times. I don't script these videos. I always enjoy doing them kind of off the cuff, as it were, and just kind of going through the dev diary as it is. But yeah, let me know what you think. It sounds interesting. It sounds very different. It isn't exactly what I thought we'd be doing. I thought it'd be more Civ-esque, and we'd just be, you know, building towns and being Sweden, just expanding. And it does sound a little bit like that, but it does sound like a different way of doing it, having this basically focal point of your realm being your capital, and then towns being just like expansions of your realm in a way, and that's kind of how you specialize as well a little bit. So anyway, as I said, let me know what you think, but we're going to move on to Outposts. Regions and vassals are not the only way to control territory on the map. You can also send out pioneers and have them build outposts. When built, outposts immediately bring all tiles in a 1 hex radius under your control. As you can see on the map down here, I think this down here is an outpost, because this is obviously Leon. Nice, I think this is a vassal. I think they do cover that in one of the dev responses, so we'll go over that in a second. And then I think this one with like the fully hashed lines, I think this is an outpost, because it doesn't have a name. Because they have a much looser restriction in where they can be placed, outposts can even be built right next to another nation's territory to stake a claim. Of course, outposts are a lot easier to take down than capitals or even towns, so make sure they are well defended against roaming barbarians and other nations alike. The basic outpost can build trade posts within its territory, allowing you to send valuable goods to any of your regions. So I think this is basically used to kind of like grab strategic resources and claim them as your own in a way. So in this example called Border Gore, it wouldn't be a Paradox game without Border Gore. But if this is an outpost, I guess it's been used to grab this desert for whatever reason. And then you can basically send those resources to your region, which is here. In this example, it's obviously France. You've got Lyon, you've got Ames. Definitely going to pronounce that wrong. And then, as I say, I think Nice is actually a vassal, but we'll cover that later on. And yeah, you basically use these to kind of build roads out, which they are going to cover in a second as well. But to like grab resources and then send them to your home region rather than having to expand the map out. I guess they have to do it this way because otherwise there'd just be so many resources on the map that no one could use. And I guess this is a way around it. I actually, again, like this system. It definitely makes for like strategic ideas of like, okay, I'm going to build an outpost up here to grab this iron or something. And then I've got to make sure that's defended because Germany or somebody could just come in and defeat my outpost and steal that resource for themselves. So I kind of like how this works. Again, it's a little bit different to Civilization or similar games from what I know anyway. Because these trade posts do not require workers, they can be extremely potent to supercharge your economy, particularly when available workers are scarce. They're kind of extraction things, you know, taking that iron for free basically off the tile by the sounds of it. Later in the game, more advanced outpost types become available, such as castles and missions. These allow you to provide extra abilities to your outpost and can make them a larger part of your overall strategy. They don't go into this anymore. I guess castles are like fortifications, basically. Build like little choke points on the map or something. And then missions, I guess, like religious. That sounds like something where you can maybe push your religion into another empire. Because it does say you can build these right up to their borders. So maybe you can do that, put a mission in there. And then I'm thinking of mission like a religious mission. I'm guessing that's what it means. And you could maybe push your religion into that other realm or something. They are differently named, so I'm guessing they have different functions. Again, I imagine they'll cover them in a dev diary at some point. Outposts are very convenient for establishing a road network through your nation, as each one you build will automatically connect up to other nearby outposts, capitals, and towns. Of course, just the normal progress of a region and its towns are often enough to get roads where you need to go. But where there is a bigger gap in terrain to cover, outposts can quickly get the job done. And you can see that in this screenshot again here. It has kind of built these roads on the outside here, kind of linking everything up. So it sounds like you don't build roads manually. They basically just build towards your places of interest as you kind of build them from the sounds of it, which I quite like. I think building roads manually in games just gets super tedious, and I prefer it this way. I quite like the Civ way, where at the beginning of the game, if you have a trader, they basically make a road because they're trading along a particular path, and eventually that makes a road. Maybe that would work a little bit better where it gradually builds it, but I like this as well. It's perfectly fine. Outposts also provide a defensive bonus and increase the healing rate for any of your armies stationed there. You can use these as little fortification zones, little landing places for your armies, and then send them elsewhere, which if you have them built right up to another realm, kind of makes sense. There are also many powers that let you spawn units at a friendly settlement, which includes outposts. Using outposts tactically as a forward base or reinforcement hubs will give you a significant military advantage. Basically what I just guessed at. So basically you can use them defensively, but also offensively doing different things as well. Now we are going to take another look at this screenshot before we finish. And what you can tell in the top left corner up here is viral illnesses. And I think this icon here was in the trailer as the Age of Disease, I think it was called. So it seems like in this game here, they are in a Age of Disease, and viral illnesses 2 out of 20. I wonder if this fills up. Does it spawn like the Black Death or something? I guess that's what it is. And interesting mechanic for that is how it works. You can go into the Age of Disease or whatever it was called. I think that's what it was called in the trailer. And I guess if this bar fills up as a crisis, as it says here, it's very small, you might not be able to see it, but it says crisis. It like spawns like a Black Death or something, and it rampages around the map. Now, outside of that, there's nothing too interesting here that we haven't already seen. The government types, which they are going to get into later on. Exploration, warfare, engineering, we've seen that as well. God King Dynasty. I want to be a God King Dynasty in this game. It sounds awesome. I hope they do cover the ages in the next dev diary, or one soon, because that's one of the most interesting mechanics they've got. And they did talk about it in the first dev diary. And I just want more information on how that works, because it looks really interesting. And if this is how it works with like spawning like a Black Death, if things spiral out of control, then That would be really cool. Maybe it's if you don't have enough food or something and the crisis progresses and then that spawns disease. I'm not too sure. So this is the first look at some of the detailed mechanics in Millennia, and they hope it basically gives us a little bit of information on the basic building blocks of the map control game. There's a lot more to talk about, and in the next dev diary, which I think this was 2 weeks from the last one, I'm kind of hoping they come out weekly, but I guess maybe it's going to be every 2 weeks. I guess we'll find out next week. They're going to be talking about nations, governments, and more. So fantastic. We're going to find out exactly maybe how these vassals work, and then the different government types, and more about those similar things. So that is the dev diary itself. So hopefully you have enjoyed it. Hopefully it's not been too confusing and you've kind of got out of it some information about how Millennia works. Let me know what you think. But before we go, we're actually going to cover a dev response here because it does cover some of the things we've already talked about. So as they say here, they've been reading the comments and there's been some confusion. If you go to the comments of this dev diary, it is just 2 pages of utter confusion about all of these mechanics. Regions are considered the entire sum of the hexes controlled within its border. So as I said, think of Civilization where you have that colored zone that is your land. There is a single capital city that you use to interface with the region. You make production assignments and assign workers through the city. You also can create towns in a region to help it grow and expand. The border of a region grows naturally over time as it exerts influence over the surrounding territories. So again, very much how Civilization works. You build up influence and that pushes your borders out. Regions spread influence evenly over every unknown tile along their border, and each hex has its own conversion cost based on what terrain it is and how far away it is from your capital. Building a new town in a region not only has its own income for the region, but also acts as a new focal point for the distance calculations. So creating towns on your borders of your regions will make that region expand in that direction, or create towns at the center of your region to make them more easily defended. I covered this a little bit before, but this is kind of a much better dev response, kind of how this works. And yeah, it basically works the way I described earlier. Put everything close to your capital, make it easier to defend, or if you want to push in a certain direction, you can put a town near the edge of your border, and then that basically moves your center of influence a little bit in that direction, and they'll push out in that direction a little bit more. And then this is the important bit. New regions can only be gained by converting vassals. This is why I was saying they should have covered vassals way more in the dev diary. Vassals are basically the same thing as full regions. They grow borders, grow population, and so on, just like regions, but autonomously, so not controlled by you. It is basically like a city-state, as I mentioned before. You can influence vassals in minor ways, but if you want to take direct control of a vassal, it is best to convert it to a region to give yourself more tools to shape its growth directly. And again, they don't mention how you do that. I imagine you can do it peacefully or you can do it through warfare, but they don't say. And it also is kind of vague about how you can influence them and things like that. But that might be covered next time, as they mentioned before, potentially. And then they've got some rapid fire answers. Region borders do not blend together. Each region is distinct within a nation. So actually, that's different to what I said earlier. I said if you integrate one of these vassals, it merges in with your nation, but it actually doesn't. It is actually 2 separate regions and they never merge. I'm not sure what I think about that. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I kind of wish they did, but without playing the game, I'm not sure, maybe it makes more sense this way. The borders for regions, vassals, and outposts are visually distinct. Notice the hatching pattern for the outpost, the thin border for the vassal. So yeah, I was correct. The hatching pattern is a outpost, Nice is a vassal, and Leon is your region, your actual empire. It's kind of weird to me that the vassals are called the same as your, this is obviously a French name and has the French flag. So maybe this is where they've already kind of integrated them into their realm. I'm not too sure. Again, I really wish they'd gone into this a little bit more. Like, how are they named? Like, I'm guessing maybe Miami is the same. For here, this looks like the German flag, and I imagine Miami was a vassal and they've integrated them into their realm, and then it would look like this, basically, if they're fully integrated. Maybe they're just in control of this vassal, and then this is where they've been fully integrated. That could be our guess anyway, until we know any different. And then roads are entirely dynamic and are based on how close together you build your settlements. If your outpost is in the middle of nowhere, you won't get a road. If it is near one of your other settlements, a new road connects that outpost with the other settlement. If a settlement is destroyed, roads will disappear if the other connections are too far apart. So again, you could use this to interrupt the flow of another nation if you took out maybe like a middle town and kind of like cut off their roads from each side of their region. I think that's what they're talking about. I'm not too sure about this as well. I think I'd prefer if the roads just stayed. It doesn't really make much sense that the roads just disappear if you kind of take out the middle connection. Like, surely the roads should stay there, but maybe they just go inactive or something, or they have a massive penalty because you don't control them yourself. I think that would be a better solution. The fact they just disappear, I don't know. I'm not too down with that, to be honest. I think it would be better this other way. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And then lastly, there is another dev response. Vassals have their own metrics for growth and resource production that are distinct from full regions. The value you get from a vassal is going to depend highly on your government, natural spirits, and ages. So that is, again, how your natural spirit decisions and things like that, your government type, is going to basically alter how vassals interact with you and what you get from them. I imagine if you go down a militaristic national spirit, maybe vassals give you more manpower, maybe they give you units. Again, we don't really know. That will get covered in a later dev diary as well, I would imagine. But anyway, that is the dev diary for this week. A lot longer of a video than I thought it was going to be for how little there really is kind of written here. But hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully it's given you a bit more information on how Millennia works. I'm looking forward to the next dev diaries. The more we get to see this game, the more I think we're going to understand exactly how it plays. I still think there is a little bit of like mystique about how some things are going to work, which is good. It means it's different to other 4X games I play. So I'm down for that. I just wish we kind of knew more about it. But we are also just in the second dev diary. So, you know, it's nothing too crazy. We'll find out things before launch, whenever that is. But anyway, on that note, we are going to leave it there for today. As always, if you've enjoyed the video, hit that like button. It helps other people find the series and the channel in the future. If you're new here, I cover dev diary news. I do let's plays for mainly historical strategy games, but also some other things now and then on the channel. But on that note, we're going to leave it there for today, and I'll see you in the next one.